And if you think I'm going to stand outside with a chill factor of 77,000 below zero for more than 2 minutes, you are mistaken. We are standing outside the studios of Channel 5 WPTZ television near Plattsburgh, as you can see by the sign on the wall. Today is November 25th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're getting a taste of real winter weather with strong winds gusting to 20-some miles an hour. I don't mean to give you a complete weather forecast, but I'm just trying to generate a little sympathy for what Calvin and I are doing here today. You are going to find out what it's like putting news together at a very busy afternoon a couple of days before Thanksgiving inside WPTZ television. Channel 5, Stuart Ledbetter, who is the news director, has graciously invited us here to do our little hometown television show. So I think you're going to be seeing some very interesting things on our program today as you join us throughout the rest of this hour and a half or so on our little corner.
Can you do Friday at noon?
Yeah, it's already a plan.
Super. I checked with the...
And we're on the inside now where the wind isn't blowing, unless you count the flurry of paper going through this thing. There's a great excitement this late in the afternoon as Channel 5 WPTZ television prepares for its nightly news at 6 o'clock. Here is the news director, Stuart Ledbetter. How are you doing today?
Very well, Gordy. Welcome. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for allowing one camera to view other cameras from the inside. It's a real treat. I've been here recording commercials, but never at this time of the afternoon. It's how do you handle the pressure?
We're used to it by now. As you know from your years in the business, the hour or two prior to the newscast is the most chaotic. It's when our reporters and photographers are returning from the field, where the producers are assembling each news story, assigning how long it will be, where it will go in the upcoming show, and it's a period of nervous energy.
It is. I've always told people I have cranked out so much adrenaline in short periods of time in my business and you in your business. It's impossible to explain to another person what goes on in your brain when the clock chases you around all day.
I can tell you that all of my relatives know not to call between 4 and 6 p.m. because I can never talk to them. You're constantly interrupted. You have to keep 10 balls up in the air, doing a juggling act each and every day. Weekends are a little less chaotic. The telephone doesn't ring as often. The fax machine doesn't spew out paper quite as often. But this is a good time. Here we're on a Tuesday afternoon about 4:30, and this is a pretty good representative of what goes on in a television newsroom.
Stuart, before we begin our little tour here, I'd just like to get a little bit of your background, where you came from and how you got here, how long you've been here, and what you hope to accomplish in your life.
Well, I'll leave.
Where do we begin?
Yeah, I guess I'd be a veteran of news in this television market.
So.
I've been here 14 years in various capacities. Started as a rookie reporter in our bureau in Burlington, and was transferred to Plattsburgh in 1989. I anchored the 6 o'clock news for 2 years, and became news director at that time, where I've served to the present. From this point forward, who knows? You know as well as I do, the broadcasting industry is crazy, and a lot of people move around from market to market, but so far Champlain Valley is my home, and I expect it will continue to be.
Yeah, we've talked about that so many times. Calvin and I were talking about that before our cameras even rolled today. There's something that attracted us here and something that keeps us here, and those roots are pretty hard to pull up, aren't they?
If you had told me 14 years ago that I would be here in 1997, I'd bet every nickel I had that you were wrong. And you'd have a few nickels now had you made the bet.
Absolutely true, because I was planning on 6 months when I moved here in 1961.
The business is a transient business, and unfortunately, while that's good if you're looking for a job, it takes its toll in terms of institutional memory. For example, and not everyone behind me would know that of a serious accident that might have occurred 10 years ago. So it's good to have a mix try to keep a few people in your newsroom that have been around a long time. Now with the advent of computers, we have archives that help. But if you've only been somewhere a year, it's pretty hard to know what happened 10 years earlier. In this business, you tend to move from market to market. At this point, if I were going to take another job in the news business, I would be forced to move to another, typically to another television market in a larger market. This is the 91st largest television market in the country of about 225. So we're in the top half, but there are 90 above us.
How big a staff do you have?
We have 26 full-time people who produce news 6 days a week. We have 4 newscasts a day during the week. So it's we have staff here 21 of the 24 hours each day. It's not enough people, Gordy, let me tell you.
It's never enough people.
No, it's not. What I could do with another 5 employees, I dream about it sometimes.
Yeah, I dream about the business a lot too. We're going to take a little tour around this place to see how it works from the inside out. We'll continue in just a moment. And we are now in the inner sanctum.
Otherwise known as my office.
We were looking at these boxes here, and he said, looks at him, he said, well, yeah, maybe that will be a good prop for a very good reason.
Well, just because it illustrates the transiency of the broadcasting business. Each one of these tapes and resumes represents an application from someone who wanted to work here. This guy is interested in any reporter positions available at WPTZ. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. We get in a lot of applications for every opening that we have from all over the country, every state, some from overseas, some from Europe. It's amazing how many people want to be in this business, which
you try to spend the first 5 minutes trying to talk them out of it, right?
Well, we can be reasonably selective, but we try to. At least my philosophy is to try to find the combination of 26 people that will yield the best result on our air each night. I try to find groups of people who will work well together and who will fit in and hopefully have some fun along the way.
You know, I'm sure most of our viewers have no idea how you choose what news stories to cover and whether that's an ongoing process or whether you brainstorm at 6 o'clock in the morning, or how does it work?
Well, maybe if you want to come out here, I'll show you the map, and that'll give you a real good idea.
We'll follow you right outside the door, and we'll make a decision.
Over on the right here, Gordy, is where the assignment editor, assistant news director sits. That's why he has the scanners. He's got 2 phones. He's got an internet connection. He's got our own internal news network. It's a LAN called Newstar. Every terminal is connected to every other, and it allows us to send email and to file scripts right up until news time, actually until the second the story airs. We can refine it, correct it, add to it, correct a typo or a spelling error, which I shouldn't admit, but it's television, so what the heck.
Oh, you can.
The maps on the wall
Yep.
illustrate, we cover 2 states. We cover a little bit of the southern province of Quebec. And when our signal and our television market that was assigned to us by the FCC includes the 3 counties in northern New York, Clinton, Franklin, Essex. It used to cover the eastern half of St. Lawrence. That is no longer the case. So it's Clinton, Essex, Franklin, and then over here, basically all of Vermont with the exception of the southernmost area, which is part of Albany. So all of this, and even 2 counties in New Hampshire. So it's a huge area. And so when you ask how we decide what to put in our shows or not, a subject of some sensitivity in the North Country, as I understand, it's tough. And there's no, right way to do it. As a mass media, it's our job to try to appeal to the broadest possible audience that we can. That's how you maximize audience, and that's why it's called broadcasting. We're trying to serve a broad audience. And so what we try to do here is a mix, a balance of stories that affect viewers in our assigned market. which is not easy. And some days work better than others.
And that potential audience is well up into the millions.
We have about, there are about 500,000 households in our U.S. market. And in every household, I think you're supposed to have 2.3 people. So you have over a million, about a million U.S. viewers in your total possible universe. That assumes, though, that your signal can penetrate every valley that has a TV set anywhere in this area, which, as you know, our market is not flat. So there are pockets. And I know people who, you know, if you live on one side of the hill, you get PTZ, and if you live on the other side of the hill, you get CAX, for example. That's the way it goes. We're not in Kansas anymore.
No, we're not. We're not, Dorothy. Not at all. Andy Wormser would be in this chair.
He's doing something.
But he's busy. You mentioned that you have an assistant news director, so yes. I thought it might be an appropriate time to mention his name.
A very capable
He's been here for a while, too.
He's been with us 6 years. He took a hiatus and went to Portland, Maine for a year, worked for the CBS station there, and then we enticed him back. On the far side, Cal, you can see Erin Clark. She's writing a script. On the right is the producer, Jody Evans, who's talking now with the casually dressed 6 o'clock co-anchor, Tom Halleck. That will change between now and 6 o'clock. The second tier, Tom sits on the far end there, and in the near side is our new producer, Stephanie Holmes, who will be moving into the producing slot next week.
You know, as I look around here, I remember, I don't know if you have an alumni committee or not, but I can remember all the people I've known who worked at Channel 5 WPTZ over the last 36 years, and many of those people were fast friends of mine, and several of them have gone on to bigger, if not better things, haven't they?
They have. We have quite a list of alumni, as you point out. In my time here, the person who comes first to mind is Dawn Fratangelo.
How could you help it?
Who?
What a lady.
Yeah, a local gal. Went to Plattsburgh State. This was her first television job here, and she left, I would say, 10 years ago at this point, and went from Plattsburgh, New York, to San Diego. Was in San Diego a year, went to Boston, was in Boston a year, went to New York City, and from New York City was plucked by NBC News, and now is a correspondent for Dateline NBC. So she's probably been the most successful of those folks that I can recall. But
and
Jeannie
never forget that Jeannie Mose, who we
went
see
to CNN,
every day.
is still at CNN with her distinctive style, and I haven't spoken with her. Dawn calls every now and then, same old Dawn. Down to earth, unpretentious.
Never forgets her roots. She promotes SUNY Plattsburgh State every opportunity. Came back to do a winter commencement address one time.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there are others. We've sent reporters to much larger television markets all over the country.
And some of the people who worked here and spent their entire careers here still live in our community. Our favorite Bird Bourdain is still
That's right.
seen every now and again.
Bird has launched a second career as a pitchman, I guess you might call them, selling cars for Parker in Champlain, and his shtick is apparently sold quite a few new cars.
Absolutely wonderful, charming personality, like our own Chet Bosworth, who retired from the radio business a few years ago, and one time in the not-too-distant future, we're going to get several of the old-timers together from that business, and there'll be some stories to tell. Maybe never before on television and never again. But yes, it's nice to look back, but it's nice to look ahead, and you've already alluded to something that I think is a very significant part of television news these days. It used to be that radio news had one up on television in the sense that it could be immediate. That playing field is getting more level all the time, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I came from the radio business, too, and when I first started, the first thing I recall thinking was, what a pain it is to get a story on the air on television, comparatively. than in radio. In radio, you can hang up the phone with the fire chief. You've got a little piece of sound which you've recorded on a reel-to-reel or some kind of tape machine, and you can go to air with that a minute or two later. In television, in order for us to break in, I need at least 5 or 6 people to operate the studio cameras, the master control switcher, the director, an audio person, and of course the anchor. If we're going to roll tape, if we have, let's say, for this example, a fire or something that is significant enough for us to break in, we would need a tape operator to cue the tape and roll it at just the moment that the anchor makes reference to it. And all of those things have to work seamlessly in order for us to have a flawless product. So comparatively to our friends in radio, it's a big pain. Television production is a pain. But you're right. It's getting somewhat easier. Equipment has changed dramatically since I started.
Well, in the old days, you used to have to transport the film somewhere.
That's right.
Now, for example, you can do that by microwave.
Yes, and a videotape, of course, changed things dramatically 15 years ago. Right behind Cal, this is just a good example. These two machines record satellite material virtually every hour of every day. What you're seeing up here is the NBC News channel. This is the affiliate news service. And with this device, which is called a router, I can direct what we take in on any one of our dozen satellite dishes out back to these tape machines. For example, suppose there were something in Syracuse today that we wanted to get some tape on our newscast tonight. The Syracuse station would put it up on a satellite. We would take it down here and would take these tapes out of the machine and bring them into our master control, and those would air tonight at 6. With these routers, this, for example, is a...
he's a little tired of all this media frenzy.
This is a satellite interview with Ann Curry from NBC News, and she's doing a talkback with the NBC station in Denver. It's going up on a satellite. We and everyone else around the country who's an NBC station can tune it in and pick what we want off this bird. But, for example, I'll just sort of flip the router here for a second. I hope I don't screw anything up. This is the monitor's a little screwed up, but that's some kind of a syndicated show feed on satellite 1. On satellite 2, we have something else. Looks like an entertainment program that we're probably recording for later broadcast. On satellite 3 is something from Europe. Don't know what that is. On satellite 4, there's nothing, and on satellite 5 is something, it's a hard copy, a syndicated show, which airs, I'm not sure if it airs on Channel 5 or on our sister station now, the Fox station, Channel 44. They moved in this summer.
Something else we haven't even, but you're undergoing so many changes around here, I'm not sure even you from the inside can keep up with it all.
It's true. We have 2 television stations that are housed in this building here in Plattsburgh, 2 full power stations, the NBC and the Fox. And I'll take you into the next room and you can see the brand new, all digital, fancy schmancy master control suite, which is pretty neat.
And we'll do that in just a moment. And we moved out down the hallway and took another left. Stuart, where are we now?
We're in the new master control. This one room controls both Channel 5 and the new Fox affiliate here, Channel 44. And what distinguishes this suite from the master control of 6 months ago is that it's almost entirely digital. Now that's a buzzword you hear a lot these days, and it may not mean a whole lot to some of your viewers, but if there was any doubt that computers have invaded every facet of our lives, there will be no more. What we do here is we will record, for example, I'll pick an example, the Oprah Winfrey Show comes in in the morning at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We don't air it until 5 o'clock that afternoon. We have the capability here to have it come in on one of these, they're called virtual recorders. Essentially, it's a giant hard drive. It records all the material right off the satellite, and then it plays it back right off the hard drive. It means there's no tape. There's no moving beta show tape, and so it's more reliable and it's less expensive. Being able to control 2 TV stations from one room is more efficient. It means that theoretically we can have one body in here, let's say on Christmas night, operating both stations with one pair of hands.
Now you're talking more like radio.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of neat, and it's nice that it's all new, and that's what putting the new TV station together allowed us to do here.
But you know, it's very nice to see it from the inside, because I'm sure our viewers had no concept of what happens inside here, how complicated it is, how many people it takes to put a newscast together. It's rather amazing.
Well, we have 26 people in the news department. That does not include the director, the engineering and master control folks, the studio camera operators, the teleprompter operator, and so forth. I mean, add another dozen, I'd say, on top of that. And that's what it takes to put a newscast on the air.
Well, there are a lot of other staff in the building who have many other jobs, which I think our audience should know about.
Well, we don't work for nothing. So in order to pay us...
Oh, you don't?
No. It comes as a big surprise. So in order to have the staff be paid and to have our parent company make some money, we need a staff of salespeople to sell advertising. We're an advertising-oriented business, and we don't charge viewers a nickel for our product, but we do charge advertisers. And we need people in traffic. That's the name of the department that schedules the commercials so that they run at the appointed time, and they run as often as they're supposed to. And engineers who keep all the equipment working properly and our transmitter properly maintained, and our news equipment is repaired if it breaks. We have management, of course, and the front office staff. We have about probably all together maybe 100 employees who work directly or indirectly for the station.
You know, we started our program by standing near the satellite dishes outside. In terms of how long I've been in the broadcasting business, that's a relatively new phenomenon, but you sure do rely on those birds for a lot of the stuff you do.
Gordy, it's the greatest single thing that's changed in my time here. It used to be when the FedEx truck or the UPS truck arrived each day, the guy would have armloads of tapes. You know, tomorrow's Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune would be delivered today on tape. Now, the UPS guy has very little to do. It's all delivered by satellite. And every time you read or you see the space shuttle go up, or some other country's space shuttle go up, oftentimes they're delivering satellites into space. And having more and more satellites flying around up there has made it much less expensive for distributors to get their product to television and radio stations cheaply. So aside from that, it's much faster. It's instantaneous. We can, when we got tape back from the Olympics, for example, when we sent Blaine Applegate to Norway in 1992, boom, it went up in Norway, and literally 5 seconds later it was here in Plattsburgh.
We talked about the immediacy of radio and how hard you try to do that oftentimes on television, and it's still difficult if you want to go on the scene of a breaking news story today. In the radio business, it was a matter of taking a Marty transmitter, a microphone, and a small antenna, plugging it in or running it on battery power and going on the radio, or in the case of recent years, since the advent of the cellular telephone, stand on a street corner, talk on the phone, and broadcast the news. When Channel 5 goes live, there's a big truck, generally, and we're talking big truck.
Yeah, well, there's a truck. I mean, it's not an 18-wheel type,
No.
but it's bigger than a bread box.
Yeah.
Channel 5 and Channel 3 each have a satellite truck, which allows us to broadcast live. We can have up to a 3 or 4 camera shoot. We could almost do a hockey game and switch it on the satellite truck, and we could do that anywhere in North America. And again, as this price of satellite time, when we shoot a signal up, let's say, for example, we send the satellite truck to Lake Placid. Say there's something going on there. We shoot the signal up to a satellite which we rent we will essentially buy 5 minutes or 10 minutes of satellite time, which means, we get to send a signal to the satellite and then download it here for 5 or 10 minutes. And it's during that time, and it's no accident that we air that story at exactly that time so that we can take advantage of our satellite connectivity. We still use cellular phones, and we still do things the old way in many cases because it's expensive to operate the satellite truck. But boy, there are times when it just saves you. You couldn't otherwise get the story.
And there are many times where you have to go back, and I'm sure we've all seen the words on television, file footage. You have to go back into the archives and say, now, where's that piece we did in 1989? We need a picture of this guy. And that's a little bit of fun at the last minute, too.
It's not a lot of fun. I don't know. Maybe you have more. Because, usually when you can least afford the delay, that's when, and it's Murphy's Law. But you're right. We do use file footage to illustrate stories. Another big difference, of course, between TV and radio is that we've got to have a graphic or a piece of videotape for almost everything. So, for example, just the other day when Tony Laughing was arrested up at the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation, we dug back into the archives for the most recent shot of Tony Laughing, and that was on our air that night. We were not there when the state police made their arrest, so we used our archives, and I'll show you. If you want to go next door, I'll show you where it's all kept.
Sometimes you are. Sometimes, the relationship between the law enforcement agencies and all kinds of media, the print media, the electronic media in this area is better than any place I've ever seen in my life, but that takes a little nurturing, doesn't it?
It does. Generally, I think you're probably right on target with that. In some markets, it is so competitive between stations, newspapers, radio, television stations, that well, for example, when your friend here, Cal, isn't looking, I might come up with a little piece of Vaseline on my finger and rub it on the front of his lens. So so 5 minutes or 10 minutes from now, when he grabs his camera to go and get the money shot of the criminal being led out of the courthouse, he won't get it because somebody has smeared Vaseline on his lens. That's an old story. I mean, it's never happened here, but I mean, sabotaging your competitor is something that you sadly hear about from time to time in big competitive news markets.
But actually, the people in the news media here are downright friendly comparing to so many settings that people can see on television when there's a mad scramble for a major story, God forbid, if a politician is shot or there's a plane crash somewhere. I've been involved in certain incidents, for example, without being too specific, on Plattsburgh Air Force Base, where we had imported reporters from some of the major networks and independent stations in New York City, where they were ready to knock people down to get their shot. We're downright courteous around here. You want to help me with that light? Yeah, you can use the light.
And here's why, because tomorrow it might be you that forgets your battery or leaves a stupid little thing like a microphone cable back at the shop. And, if you don't, you only get your tape if everything in the chain works well. If one little thing goes awry, you have no product that day. And so I think people help each other out because, they have to face each other the next day and the next day and the next day. When, for example, a presidential candidate comes to town, you're right. I mean, the national media comes on there, and literally, they'll push you out of the way to get their shot. No, the local folks don't do that, and by and large, we're pretty cooperative, despite the fact that for example, Channel 3 and 5, they're our arch rival. But that's competition, and that's a healthy thing.
Oh, it certainly is, and there's some very friendly competition in this area. Just before we leave this room, I want to talk about a subject that's near and dear to me, and I know it is you, before I forget it, and that is cameras in the courtroom. Here in New York State, there was a fairly sizable experiment. You and I have worked in the Associated Press, which all but carried the torch for cameras in the courtroom over a long period of time, and now we've lost that, and now we're in the midst of a very serious murder trial here in Clinton County, and you can feel the pinch, can't you?
You bet I can, and this is one issue on which I will say first and foremost, I'm not objective on this issue.
Nor am I.
I think it's shameful that the state of New York allowed or closed the door to the third branch of government, the judicial system. It is very difficult now. Any courtroom information that we broadcast will be our interpretation of what happened. Our viewers will no longer be able to see and hear directly from witnesses, defendants, prosecutors, judges. Will no longer be able to see the court system firsthand. It's too bad. New York is one of I don't know, 2, 3, 4 states in the country. New York comes up with some crazy arguments to shut the door to cameras. They ignore the experience of 45 other states.
And you know, at some point in the process, I ran a lot of informal surveys among judges, court officials, and attorneys in this area, and they were very much in support of cameras in the courtroom. Why? Because people like you and me didn't rock the boat. It's
hard for me to listen to some of our state lawmakers and not, bust out laughing. The O.J. Simpson experience shaded, I think, the whole issue. And it was used as a reason for some in Albany to say, no, we don't want to have television or still cameras in New York State courts anymore because the Jonathan Henry trial in Plattsburgh will resemble the O.J. Simpson circus. Well, there's never been another trial like the O.J. Simpson circus. So to compare the two is fallacious, it seems to me. It's ridiculous. It's hard that they argue that with a straight face. A murder trial in Clinton County is just that. It's a murder trial here. We don't have scaffolding with media organizations from throughout the world here. No, but what we try to do is show directly to our viewers their local court system at work. Unfortunately, we are no longer able to do that, and we have to go back to the way we did it 25 years ago with sketch artists and interpretations of what you heard in court. Sure, you can still go down, any individual can still go down and sit in the back of the court, but as you and I both know, few people have the time or nor inclination to go and do that. They look for a summary of the day's events. That's what we try to provide them. Unfortunately, thanks to the state legislature, we have a huge boulder in our path.
The reason I mention that for a lot of reasons. First of all, people were used to seeing it. They were used to, they didn't know how it worked and why it worked, and most people did not know how hard you and I fought to keep this experiment going and turn it into something permanent in our state. But they know what they don't have anymore, and it's a shame to take a step backwards.
Couldn't agree with you more, Gordy, and it's a big step backwards. It's the third branch of government. You and I and everyone else in the state pays the judges and the defense attorneys and the prosecutors, and it's very expensive. It's the third branch of government, as I said, and it is now more closed than ever.
And I should say that some of our North Country legislators did go to bat for us, but they were outvoted. Simple.
That's right. Both the state senator and the state assemblyman were supportive. The Speaker of the Assembly had his reservations, but mostly there was a committee chairman who, the way it was worded, if they took no action, the cameras in the court bill would die. So it's sort of like when Congress raises its pay, they have to vote not to raise it, and if they do nothing, it takes effect. That's
why people are confused by the way some amendments and propositions are worded on their ballot. You have to be very careful to read it, every word, to know whether you're voting yes or no.
And that's no accident, Gordy. I mean, I think there's a degree of dishonesty here. Why can't we just be straightforward and have a straight up or down vote? But it doesn't work that way.
And now we'll put our soapbox to one side and finish our tour of Channel 5 WPTZ television. How's that little boy doing? He's beautiful.
He's already running the house.
He's beautiful. And boy, we said inner sanctum. We are right in the middle of it all. This is the part, well, some of it at least, that your audience sees at 6 o'clock.
This is the reverse view. We're on the news set, and there are a couple of features here that folks might find interesting. This is the bank of monitors that is behind Tom Halleck and Mark Soudal at night. Some of these are real monitors, and some of them are simply graphic images that we've selected that can be changed. I can't even tell you exactly what each of these are. Oh, this is an off-air monitor, which means that what you see over the anchor's shoulder in this particular case is what's going out over the air. Over here, oh, this is our graphics production monitor. This tells you what the directors are putting together. And in fact, this is the Jonathan Henry trial. Because we have no cameras in the courtroom, we are paraphrasing what one of the defense attorneys said. So this is a graphic that will be incorporated into a story that we'll have on that trial coming up tonight at 6, and on and on. So these form the backdrop for 2 of the 4 anchor positions. If you come down this way, this is a blown up photograph, essentially, of the Champlain Valley at night, which we use behind all of our 11 o'clock newscasts, and this time of year behind our 6 o'clock as well, because it's dark. What we can do is, these are all in a pulley and a weight system, and hold on, you stay right there.
Yes, we will. Okay, you're back.
And change the colors for morning and noon newscasts. So that just gives each show a slightly different look. There are some other changes as well, but I thought while we were here I'd show
The
it to you.
studio has undergone some amazing metamorphosis over the years, too.
Oh boy, we've had...
Including the entire location. Channel 5 wasn't always located here.
No, we were on Cornelia Street until, I think, 75. At least that's what the cornerstone on this building says, 1975. I've seen pictures. It was not an elegant place.
No, I was there many times, and in those days, Bird used a chalkboard. So you see how far we've come.
That's right. And that's a real good next stop. I want to show you how Tom Messner gathers his weather data, all on computer, but he's got some neat toys over in his office.
So where do people sit now when the newscast goes on the air?
Well, they sit in one of these 4 chairs for our main shows. Then off to the left, we have a pop-up screen and a mini set that is used either for reporter debriefs, or the pop-up screen allows us to put a giant image over the shoulder of the person sitting on the right-hand anchor position on the main set. Underneath the set, probably shouldn't take you back here because you can see all of our debris, Kleenex, mirrors, telephones.
Spaghetti, all kinds of spaghetti. Look at the wires.
No cookies, but everything but. The clip-on microphones, they're called lavalier microphones. They're very small and they have a pretty good frequency response. There are probably 50 or 60 lights, which you don't realize here, and the reason why television people wear makeup on the set, although it's better than it used to be. You know, at home you might have a couple of 100-watt lights lighting your room. Well, each one of these fixtures is between 750 and 1,000 watts, and there are probably 20 or 30 on right now. That's a lot of wattage shining down on you.
You don't need any other heat source, that's for sure.
You don't. It warms. It's nice and toasty here when it's cold outside, but that amount of light will wash out even the most suntanned among us. So that's why you need makeup to sort of smooth out the skin tone, or else you'd look white as a ghost, literally.
And I also know that when a person sits in that chair at 6 o'clock and looks perfectly composed, relaxed, with makeup on, absolutely perfect, he may have taken a flying dive into that chair 30 seconds before. And in the old days, where the teletype machine was downstairs or down the hall, sometimes the camera actually caught that action.
That's true, and it happens even at the network level.
Oh,
but
sure.
But you know the old adage in broadcasting was never run to the microphone, because if you're out of breath, you couple that with the anxiety of being a little out of breath and having to speak smoothly, and it just makes you more nervous. And there's never an opportunity to get caught up and take that big because you're on live.
It's extremely hard. And, you know, in the radio station business, I wrote the book on getting there late. And, you know, gathering that last sentence of a news story to make it exactly the way you want it, sitting in the chair, and there is no worse feeling except for Calvin, who has a little asthma, when you can't, you got to read it because you have so much news to get in and you can't get that breath.
That's right.
And thank goodness for commercial breaks.
That's right. But you just, I remember the first job on a radio station I ever had, they always advised me, don't run to the microphone because it just a disaster awaits if you do.
Yeah, you do your best, and as we all do, and it's amazing to see this process from the inside out. We'll continue our tour of Channel 5 WPTZ Television in Plattsburgh in just a moment. And this is a position that Stuart hasn't been in a while, right, Stuart?
This may be the one job here that I have never had, the studio camera operator, but I always found photography to be one of the most creative things you can do. These studio cameras, as I recall, they're about $100,000 a piece. Outrageous, but we've had them for some years now, and they're pretty sharp. These two floor cameras and a camera that we have mounted in the lighting grid capture, each of our anchors and any live segments that we do, which usually you see during the noon broadcast. But they have pretty nice lenses on them and teleprompters attached to the front, and that's what anchors read during the show.
People, when they go into a studio, they always say, it's different from what I conceive. But then most people who listened to me on the radio all those years thought I weighed 180 pounds. So the image of what you see on television and what you see in person is always a little bit different, especially as in terms of the size of the studio. But every now and again, you have to upgrade and change the motif.
It's been, I think we've had this set, oh boy, 4 years, I guess. So, at some point it'll be time to get a new one, and when we do, we will probably, well, actually in 1998, we're going to start producing news on the Fox affiliate, Channel 44, so we might get a second set for the Fox broadcast sometime next year. It'll be hard to squeeze into this room is 40 feet by 40 feet. I know because I was part of the design process to build this set, and that's tight. We had to maximize every square foot. We really need another studio that's twice the size of this.
It may happen in your lifetime, and then again, are you going to share staff for news on Fox, or have you made any advanced planning? Or?
Well, it's not going to happen at the beginning of '98. So, to be honest with you, no, we have not made those decisions. But part of the appeal to our managing the Fox affiliate here was that we could take advantage of certain economies of scale. It's efficient. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, that we have 75 people working at Channel 5. You add the Fox station under the same roof, and you don't need 150. Maybe you only need 25 more instead of, if it was a separate facility, maybe they would have to hire 75. So you can save some effort there. We'll have some additional staff when we program the Fox local news, but exactly how many and when that will start, I don't know. We're under contract to provide news on Channel 44 on or before January 1, 1999. So it's about a year.
If would there be a difference of philosophy in the two news departments, or?
No, I really don't. I really don't. The Fox stations tend to operate a little bit differently than do the big three. In terms of their coverage area and so forth, I think they probably will be a little bit more focused on the Champlain Valley and a little less concerned with the outlying areas, the Rutland, Vermont, or Messina, or Glens Falls, because their signal doesn't go as far. Fox tends to appeal to a somewhat younger audience, so it would seem logical that you would try to program local news that would take advantage of the audience you have available to you. If you sort of run counter to the rest of your programming, it's like beating your head against a proverbial wall. It makes no sense. So,
you think that'll be your responsibility ultimately?
Yeah, it's likely to be.
He says with a deep sigh.
No, I mean, It's exciting, you know. It's not every day you get to program a new television station. It's been 25 years since viewers in the Champlain Valley got a new full-power television station, so it does not happen every day.
And I might mention that getting Fox here was not a foregone conclusion. There was a lot of effort in the bidding process, and
That's right. Well, very, very briefly, the group that owns the license to the Fox affiliate for this market did not want to build and construct the station themselves. So they asked the existing broadcasters, channels 3, 5, and 22, if they would sign an agreement to staff it, to make most of the decisions, and operate the station. All 3 stations went after it. All 3 stations sort of figured, you know, the devil you know beats the devil you don't. And if we're going to have another competitor, at least we want to have some influence over it. So every station went after it, and we were successful in winning the contract. And that I think it's a 5 or 10 year contract. I'm not sure. But there was some jockeying, and then once we were awarded the contract, we had our chief competitor, Channel 3, try to block the regulatory process to put the transmitter on top of Mount Mansfield, which is where most of the other television stations already have their sticks, but somehow adding ours was somehow going to be onerous and inappropriate. It was a case of, you know, competition, and they wanted to delay us as much as they could. But now we're up and running, so there you go.
And we'll continue our tour of Channel 5 after this word. We're back again in a room we almost started our tour in today. Stuart, what have we got here?
We're back in the main newsroom, and this I just thought you might be interested in, to show you how computers and modems have changed what we do here. What you hear on the other sound is the AP wire spewing out an endless stream of paper.
Yes.
Here I just punched in the word Pataki. I could have punched in any number of things, but this is the first thing that came to mind. And you can see the AP's got several graphics. This is, for example, a graphic that we're going to use tonight. You can guess what this will end up looking like on the air. A cocktail and a set of car keys. You have a feeling it has to do with drinking and driving. I chose Pataki as a keyword, punch it in, and let's see what we get. This should be a shot, a graphic showing Mary Cuomo and George Pataki's faces with some writing on the bottom. And here it comes. This is from the Associated Press's database, which is outside of Washington. And there are 60 or 65,000 images available to subscribers of this service. And we use it quite a bit to help illustrate those stories that are just tough to illustrate.
It's another resource. In the old days, they were slides.
You bet. If you want, we can walk across the newsroom and I'll show you Tom Messner's computers. That's another thing that's changed dramatically the last few years.
We sure will.
If you come around this way.
Sure, let's follow around. I'm with you. We're in a heavy traffic zone today here.
Yeah.
Don't be nervous, Tom.
I can't work under this pressure. All right.
Okay, we're in the storm center. I expect the winds to pick up here at about 50 to 60 miles per hour at any moment. Are you getting it ready for us, Thomas?
We're getting it ready for you. You know what? It's cold out there. Every reporter in the place is complaining about the weather. Can you imagine that? It's only November.
Yeah, I imagine we'll sneak the word chill factor into the forecast tonight.
We actually did it last night, and it hurt me a lot. Below 0 wind chill already, so it's cold early this year.
Yeah, I remember those chill factor charts that we had underneath the console.
We've got one right over here, as a
Let's
matter of
say
fact.
22 miles an hour, temperature 10 degrees. Whoa!
That's right.
All right, yeah, this is exciting stuff.
Well, you were saying earlier in the program how 30 years ago, Burdan would...
Chalkboard.
That's right.
got
Chalkboard. Subsequently, he used magnets with little symbols. you remember that?
Oh, very well.
Well, it's all electronic now.
And in New York, we had artists who drew the clouds.
Is that right?
Oh, sure.
It's changed a bit since then.
Wow.
Tom and Cindy and Gib Brown, our weekend meteorologist, use these 3 computers and satellite-delivered satellite pictures and radar pictures from every quadrant of the country. And in fact, that's how we can pinpoint hurricanes as they approach and odd weather phenomenon, all over the world, really. But primarily, this is the machine that, coupled with the computer on the far left, these are Silicon Graphics computers, and they render animation. So when Tom flies underneath the clouds, and you can't make that happen quickly, can you? Or is that going to screw this up?
As a matter of fact, what it's doing right now is it's making a picture. The way it renders is it's kind of like a cartoon or like a flip book, actually, where you have one picture, then the next, then the next, then the next, and they play them all back like a flip book. And that's what makes things move, but it takes some time to actually put it together and make it look pretty.
You knew we had to put it in very simple language for me to understand.
That's from going to the schools all those
And you've
years.
done that a few times too. Isn't that amazing?
And Tom has an internet connection, and it is amazing, just astonishing what kind of weather information is available to those who have an internet connection or America Online or any one of the, again, 5 years ago, who'd have thunk it? None of us had this sort of thing.
And we don't have all of this just for the fun of it, although these toys are a lot of fun.
I'll say.
These toys save lives.
Oh, there's no question about it. The technology has come so far that we can really get a good idea of what's not only happening, but what way the stuff is moving. For instance, a severe thunderstorm or something like that. And you can say, hey, watch out, Plattsburgh, you're going to get hit in about a half hour. Pretty handy stuff.
And it's still nice to have pigeons in Malone and Tupper Lake and Saranac Lake who call up and say, whoa,
Yeah.
it's 48 below. We got 12 inches of snow in front of my house.
Well, that's true, because weather watchers can never be replaced. I don't care how many computers you have. It's never quite the same as when you get a telephone call from somebody who says, I'm telling you, the flakes are this big. Watch out. You're right. Yeah.
And the National Weather Service still pays to have those people on the payroll to mark things down and trudge through the snow and see how much precipitation there was.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And most people, I think, probably through habit, because of all these years of doing so, just pick up the phone and call those guys. So they begin to disseminate the information right back to us. And I think it's really important that people understand how closely meteorologists at TV stations, at radio stations, at newspapers work with the National Weather Service. Those people are terrific, and we need them. We really do.
And Tom, you're, and I don't want to hold you up much longer because we're getting closer to news time, but you're an outstanding personality with great compassion, and you love kids. And it's not a bad idea to get the kids in the schools, not to just get a free T-shirt, and I wish we could show the collection sometime, but because it's great to get this education process started at an early age for the understanding.
Well, I think so. I kind of put myself in their position. I think to myself, when I was in school, when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, if I had seen the guy that I watched every night on TV, I grew up in Rochester, if he'd have come into class, I think I would have taken notice, kind of sit up and say, hey, this is kind of neat. And a lot of times I'll hear from the kids, also the teachers, that say, it's nice that you can say, you need math, you need science to prepare for this, but you can show them in the classroom in a fun way. And I think it all starts to click, and they say, hey, maybe science, you don't have to be a nerd. Maybe it can be fun and that kind of thing. And we always have a good time with
And
it.
the
So.
kids go home and educate their parents.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
there are a lot of things kids learn in school and start the process, and it creates a greater awareness all the way through. And we know you're an old-time radio person, too, which
Yeah.
we had to bring up here.
Well, actually, I've been around the block doing radio, did radio for a bunch of years, but I actually got into television by accident, There was a station in Rochester that was looking for a weather person. I've never seen this done before, never seen it done since. They held open auditions, and I was a radio guy. I went, auditioned, got this job. I don't know what they were thinking, because I had no idea what I was doing.
What were we thinking?
Well, here's I actually went in there, realized I had no idea how to do this, one on TV and thought, you know, if I'm going to do this, I better get a clue, and went back to school for meteorology. So I kind of did it backwards a little bit.
You know, that's exactly the way I got into radio when I came out of college and thought I knew everything there was to know, including grammar. I went to a radio station in Patchogue, New York, and said I'd like to audition. I didn't even know quite what the word meant. The guy says, well, there's a studio, there's the records, put a tape together, play a few records, read me a little news. And I walked in there and I said, I don't know what all those knobs are for.
I know, it can be overwhelming.
I didn't get the job. But then you went from there to, you were in Watertown for a while?
Yeah, what I did was worked weekends in Rochester for just about a half a year. Went to Watertown, was doing the Monday through Friday thing like I do here, and was going to school in Oswego. So I was doing some commuting there for a while, and then ended up here and got the job here the way I think you're supposed to. Actually answered an ad that Stuart had put in some of the trade magazines, and sent a tape like you're talking about, and the rest is history.
But you know what, Stuart, and while we're on the subject, meteorologists and television weather men and women are among the most colorful people I know. So there's a package deal. Maybe this started many years ago and we said, well, this is kind of a drab subject. Let's draw pictures. Let's make the chalkboard really good. Or let's get a guy that's got this wonderful, charming, infectious smile that everybody talks about and go for it. And it happens on the national level. They pick people who have tremendous outgoing personalities to do the weather forecast. Look at the Today Show, for example.
Yeah, I mean, would you want Jay Leno to bring you the news? No. But weather and sports to some degree are the two areas of the newscast in which you can let your hair down. And should. I mean, weather doesn't have to be. When it's serious and when we have dangerous conditions on the way, it's very serious indeed.
That's why we hire meteorologists.
It's why we hire meteorologists and not, weather bunnies.
Yeah.
As that was an old expression in the business. But
I can't wait to get Bird back on.
Well,
Yeah, that's right.
there are times when it's deadly serious, but there are other times when you'd like to have some fun and you'd like to have some personality, and I think that's what we've tried to do in the three meteorologists that we have on staff here, and I think we'll keep them, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
That's good to know.
But I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's really important for us as individuals, I think, and especially in the media, to let people know that there is a human side. We're not automatons. Let them know that we're real. So you just screw up a little bit. I know every time you guys do that, you do that on purpose, just to let them know that you're
Yeah.
that it's live and not on tape. You're right, and maybe that's a good segue, because we do make mistakes, and there are nights when frankly we blow it. When either it's a technical problem or we miss a story that we just have no excuse for missing.
Or a snowstorm.
every now
I
and
wasn't going to bring that up.
Okay.
And how many pieces of mail did you get?
I was just going to say, Stuart handed me some email today. We had just recently predicted a snowstorm. We were saying 2 to 5 inches, we thought, around, the Plattsburgh-Burlington area. We've got zilch. The storm stayed south. Lake Placid saw a little bit. Montpelier, kind of that line, and then south. And we got a couple pieces of email saying, Tom, you blew it.
Did you ever hear the old phrase, better safe than sorry, though?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways to look at it. I mean, it's a funny thing. When a storm is breaking around here, we're like kids sometimes. I was on the phone from home. I've got a weather center set up in my house, talking with Cindy. Then Gib came in. We literally, all day long talking, we all agreed.
Love weather.
Well, it's
The
fun.
bigger the weather, the better
Well,
it
it's
is.
true, and I think sometimes, in fact, one email kind of referred to, you guys get kind of excited, nothing happened, and they were a little disappointed. I think they were skiers. One was a snowboarder, right?
This is just an example. You're talking about the feedback. She writes to Tom, do you know how much anxiety you've cost my little snowboarding craving body? I've counted on you and your forecasting, and what did I get? Nothing in capital letters.
The pressure
Nothing.
we're under here.
You've not delivered the snow you vowed to bring us. Says she stayed until 3 o'clock in the morning.
And
Zilch.
the- and
There you
the-
go.
and
But
the-
there-
I don't remember vowing to bring any.
well,
And the antithesis is all the hundreds of people who were so thrilled
I
that
know.
you were wrong.
Well, the bottom line in weather, if there's one thing I learned, if you're going to miss on the safe side. In other words, if you say it's going to snow and it doesn't, most people won't kill you. If it snows like crazy and you said it was going to be sunny, you won't see me in the mall, put it that
We
way.
proved before that we've come a long ways in meteorology, especially in the way to get the information to you and get it to the people, but it's still not a very exact science.
No, and some think it never will be. I mean, there's an awful lot going on in the atmosphere, and it has really come a long way. Normally, the next day's forecast, I think, is very good. 2 days out, pretty good. Third day, a little shaky. The end of the 5-day, we have fun.
I can remember when weather forecasts and being embarrassing on the radio because the regional weather forecast that came from AP was pretty poor on average. And so, you know, you were better to lick your finger and look out the window than you were to read it sometimes. But some radio announcers don't look out windows, and it used to be that some television weather people didn't either. So now, again, you do have to know what's happening when you hit the airwaves.
Well, I actually tell the story about, when was it we had the expansion on the building? The building used to end right about here, as a matter of fact. So we had an addition put on. And I don't know if you noticed that the weather forecast got substantially better not too many years ago because that window was put in. That's what I like to tell the kids in the classroom. So I say, hey, you guys, can you put the shades up over there? Take a look out, and lo and behold, the forecast was better.
And when it's snowing and we stick a reporter out under the satellite dishes out there and people can see that the snow is coming down, that's another added flavor.
There was an old story here when I first started. We had a television station that had almost no windows. The general manager had a window in his office, and the front doors were glass. But other than that, you had these tiny little windows way up high. And the story I heard was that the owners of the station at that time didn't want to put windows in the building because they were afraid that the employees might look through them, and that might harm productivity.
Whoa!
Can you imagine? True story.
Isn't that amazing? I have worked in many offices which didn't have windows, including my newsroom at the recent radio station I worked at, so you'd have to actually get up and look outside. But then for many years, before we had a little Heathkit weather computer like you have here, you relied on that 79-cent thermometer that was on the side of the window, and most of the time it was just about as accurate as anybody else.
Well, I remember being in radio, and when I was in Rochester before I got into television, same thing. There was no window. There was no window from the studio that you could see, and for the average DJ to go check, weather's not that important. I'll leave it to the weather guys. They must know what they're doing. It's dangerous, isn't it?
Well, anyway, I hope the company pays for your gas. That's all I have to say, because I know you're on the road.
Oh yeah, they take care of me. No, it's so worth it, and it's so much fun. It's my pleasure. It really is a good time.
Real good payback, isn't it?
Yeah, and I have a great wardrobe too.
That's right. Well, get to work. We know.
Right, will do.
We know we're invading what is not necessarily privacy, because this is a very public medium. It's the nature of the beast. But we're getting close to 0 hour here.
It's true. We'll be on in about 19 minutes. Most of the stories are in the final stages of editing and production at this point. This is a computer screen which has on it tonight's lineup for the 6 o'clock news. And everything that flashes means that the script has just been filed. These can change right up until the moment that the story airs. So, for example, let me go down here with the cursor. This is the lead story. It's slugged, which is just a broadcast word that means titled, multiple babies. And this is a story. Oh, okay. We've localized the story of the McCoy family in Iowa, which just the other day had 7 septuplets. 7 babies delivered, and which has captured really the attention of so many across the country. Well, it turns out that we have a fertility clinic that does advanced research, which I've been here 14 years, I didn't even know about it, but they do advanced research on fertility issues connected to the College of Medicine at UVM. We're doing a story about the next phase of fertility research that's underway there. So we're able to localize the story in Iowa for our viewers here. That's tonight's lead story. Of course, that could change. We still have 17 minutes before broadcast. So we go back to the lineup, and we can see there's the Jonathan Hendry trial. That is the third story in our show tonight. And this column indicates the amount of time measured in seconds that each story will receive. When you page down, there's the commercial break. Of course, this is the week before Thanksgiving, so we have more commercial load than we probably have in any other week all year. The week right around Thanksgiving is there's enormous demand for advertising from retailers.
It coincides with the activity in the world. I mean, everything bounces off everything else.
Sure, but in the middle of January, you have holes in our advertising schedule so big you drive a truck through it. But that's just the ebb and flow of the advertising business through the course of the year. Segment 2 has got 5 stories in it, followed by a tease, which is just the broadcast term for stay tuned. Coming up next, we'll have, this and that and the other thing.
It's very important to promote yourself. You do that more now than ever before. You don't want to. Sometimes you don't want to give away your lead story, but other times you want everybody to know our staff has worked very hard and we've got the story.
Well, there's no point in making a nice dinner if no one knows it's being served. So you're right. We try to strike a balance, knowing that our competitors are watching, but at the same time knowing that our potential audience is watching, and we want them in under the tent. And as I said before, we try to appeal to an incredibly diverse audience in 2 states and part of a province. I didn't mention that the 1.5 million people in Greater Montreal who tune in each week, although not so much to local news as to entertainment programs. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to make everyone happy, and we don't make everyone happy night after night, and I know that. And there are times when I feel very badly when I get a phone call from someone who can't understand why their neighbor's barn fire was not on our newscast. And you say, because if I covered every barn fire in which there were no animals hurt, in which there was not really a substantial loss of property or any life, that's all I would have on our broadcast at night. So it's an education, slowly but surely. We're finding our way. We're doing what no one has ever done before, which is appeal to both states. And we're proving, having been at this for 15 years now, our audience is higher than it's ever been. We're stronger competitively than we've ever been. So I feel some vindication, but it's been the result of many years of work by many, many people.
Basically, every newsroom has a general philosophy, but it has to have open sides, tops and bottoms, because you have to be able to adjust. You'd be crazy if you didn't.
I don't like absolutes, whether that's a philosophy for a newsroom or in politics or what have you. I don't like extremes. I don't like to say never, with the exception of a couple of basics. Always tell the truth. Never knowingly put a piece of information on the air that you know not to be true. Something that, aside from that, I don't want to say that I'll never show a dead body. There might be times when it's appropriate to do so. We rarely do. I can't think of the last time we did. In terms of I remember a couple of years ago, boy, did we catch heck for showing a drowning victim in the middle of winter on Lake Champlain down near Westport. And we made a very conscious decision to show about 10-12 seconds of the man being pulled out of the lake. We didn't do that to titillate or to sensationalize at all. We did that because in the 2 weeks prior to that accident, 8 people had died in our region falling through thin ice that looked perfectly fine from the surface, but the currents being what they are, run underneath and so forth, and it erodes the ice. You can't tell you fall through. The guy in this case had been an ice fisherman on Lake Champlain forever, and he fell through and drowned. I can't tell you the names it was called, the phone calls and the letters. No one else died, however, for the remainder of that winter. It shocked a lot of people, and I don't know if what we did had any effect there or not. We'll never know, but there are times in which I'm willing to be unpopular in order to achieve, our objective here, and we try day in, day out to cover the news of our market as best we can, knowing we will make mistakes. And I really hope that if people have suggestions for ways we can improve or have stories that they'd like to see on our air, that they'll call and let me know. Ask for me directly or anybody else here, and we'd be delighted to help, delighted to listen and do what we can.
There are a lot of decisions that have to be made, not in the course of a year, but in the course of every single day. And they don't end even when the lights go on and the cameras begin in that newsroom. I mean, it's truly amazing. And then when the process is finished for one day, get ready, there'll be a whole new set of decisions for tomorrow. So, you can pick out several decisions that you may or may not be happy with that you've made in the past, but you don't have time to dwell on those, do you?
Tomorrow's a new day. That's right. That's a big difference between a print and broadcast reporter. If a broadcast reporter makes a mistake, you feel terrible about it, but you know that it's out, it's gone, and there's a new newscast sometimes, 3-4 hours from now. If you're a print reporter, you've got to stare at that error all day long. It goes in the permanent clip file and so forth. The printed word somehow has more permanence than do broadcast stories. But you're right. The evolution of local news. We used to do a 6 and 11 o'clock newscast. Then we started a noon broadcast. Now we do a full newscast each morning. The staff is working harder, I think, than ever, and it's a constant state of chaos and motion in this newsroom.
But it gives you more decisions to make. When you got a new staff working in the morning, you get a head start on the day, makes it easier to pick stories for later in the afternoon, gives you more decisions to make. I was just thinking, here we are taping this program for hometown television called Our Little Corner, perhaps a couple of months in advance of the time it will be aired, and we're talking about preparing for a newscast that's going to be live in just about 11 minutes. Very, very interesting. And a lot of things are not live on television anymore. They did it with ER once, and the jury is still out as to whether it was a success. But for news, if it's not live, it doesn't have any meaning.
That's right. Every newscast that we air is live. During the World Series, month and a half ago, we had some games. Our 11 o'clock news went on, I think, one night at 12:45 in the morning, and Erin Clark was doing all she could not to yawn. But it was live, folks. We do that deliberately because in weather and sports and news, things are changing, and we want an up-to-the-minute product. At the same time, if it were on tape, we could, airbrush the mistakes and so forth. So there are real people that put this together, and they try hard. They're imperfect, but because it's live, you get to see it, warts and all.
We haven't mentioned it here, but it is a consideration when you're putting together a newscast. We've talked about the old days, and many people, including myself, have been here since the old days. There was far less competition in radio and television back then. Radio station I worked for enjoyed immense success because there was only one other signal, AM signal, in town. Television stations, back in those days, there were far less choices on the radio dial. It was pre-satellite days. There were no cable systems back in those days. You stuck an antenna up and you got a couple or three stations, 4 if you were in a metropolitan area. But now there are so many things bombarding that television screen that people can make choices about. You better be pretty slick or you're not going to survive. In a local market like this, you have to be, and I think that should be obvious to our viewers, you have to be pretty darn sophisticated to take your share of the market home with you.
Yeah, and the share, think of it as a pie. And 15 years ago, when I started, I started a radio station that it did phenomenally well, and it was all on tape. These giant reels would come in each week, and those would be the hits, and it was intended to sound as if there were a real live disc jockey there, but there wasn't, and yet the station did very well. A new station came along, 95 XXX, as I recall, and and 2 weeks later they were #1 because they put a real body behind the microphone in the greater Champlain Valley audience. Well, that was some years ago. Now, you go out to a typical car with an AM and FM radio, and you push the seek button, or the scan button, whatever, and you see how many times that changes when you go from one end of the dial to the other. There are like 30 radio stations that you can get in most parts of the Lake Champlain
And imagine
area.
what it's like in Brooklyn, New York, you know?
It's immense, and yet the population of this area has not doubled, tripled, quadrupled in those 15 years. So
Not even close.
everyone's piece of the pie is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And I'm frankly surprised that there are as many radio stations that have survived as there are. But there are new alliances that are being formed. Your old rival, B100, is now being operated by another radio company. In our case, the new Fox affiliate was being managed by us. There's some consolidation going on in the local media, but it's tough, and you're right. I think you need to have your act together, or else you won't survive.
Well, and just before we shut our cameras down for a moment and actually see what a newscast looks like when it goes on the air, what do you have any vision of the future about what things might be like in this market, say 5 years down the road, Stuart?
5 years down the road, I don't think they'll be radically different than they are right now. Channel 5 is going through an ownership change right now, and I don't yet know who will ultimately own us and the Fox station. If there are wholesale changes, our competitors will respond to that. So it's hard for me to know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would say that depending on who owns the big media outlets in the market, you can predict the degree of change. Is our population likely to get much bigger, much smaller? No. And the media will reflect that. There will be advances in technology. I think you'll see more live coverage from the city council meeting, from the site of the protest, from the scene of the crime than you do now, because it will become less expensive and more convenient to report live than it is right now. But beyond that, I don't think the media business is going to change dramatically unless there is some major external force, a real aggressive owner that comes in, or a big shift in the population or the income of the population.
I'm a fan of technology, and that'll be a big factor in how you do business over the next even 5 years, because technology goes by leaps and bounds. In my lifetime, it's been phenomenal. But in a few months or a few years, this business can change radically because of some amazing new technology. And we're on so many thresholds now, I get excited just reading about it.
It's hard to keep up. I would say one thing, though, I meant to mention: television is on the verge of probably the biggest revolution since the advent of color. Digital television is on the horizon. It's 5 to 10 years away. There's a raging debate in our industry right now about how it will all pan out. But we're all going to have to go out and buy new televisions, Gordy, which may be one reason why they've fallen in price the last couple of years.
You still have black and white sets, don't you, Calvin?
Well, televisions are about to get much wider than they are tall. Right now, it's not square, but it's not far from being square. It's a 3:4 ratio. Width to height. It's about to become a 16:9 ratio, much wider, much more like a movie theater. That's going to require a different television set. The advantage is that it is incredibly sharp. The sound is superb, and there will be no more fuzzy, signals that fade in and out if you're in a mountainous area. You'll either get it or you won't. It's a big change in the television industry. It promises higher quality, better sound. It will be very expensive for this station and every other to convert. But I couldn't let us go without mentioning high-definition television. And we have to get out of the way because, Cal, if you turn around, that's the reporter, Susan Post, who's about to do a live debrief with Aaron Clark when the news starts, which is now in a minute and a half.
And you're looking at the clock because the 6 o'clock newscast, which we've been building up to all afternoon, begins in 4 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And it's going on the air as the screen changes, and you see the logo for Channel 5 WPTZ television go on the screen. The question you might ask is, why does the 6 o'clock news not start at 6 o'clock? Well, if you get up just 30 seconds earlier, maybe you can get on first and get people to keep them from changing the channel. The delineation between programs on television is far less severe than it ever was before, if you follow my drift. When you're watching a series of programs on TV at night, sometimes you're into the second program before you realize the first one was finished. And you think they do that by mistake? No way. There are a lot of bucks involved in whether or not they can keep you tuned to a given television station, especially in terms of all the other things we mentioned today. Let's listen just a little bit. And we're here still hearing a combination of sounds in the newsroom, because even while the news is being telecast here in the North Country, news is happening out there that has to be covered at a later time. So you can hear police scanners, you can see personnel here viewing the competition. It behooves everyone to know what the competition has on the air. This is true. This is precisely what the competition is doing on their side of Lake Champlain. And interesting that the major competition comes from a television station across Lake Champlain. We've often mentioned on this program that Lake Champlain, you talk about delineation, it's still a tremendous barrier. And some of this competition between the two major television stations, and actually 3 stations with networks, or 4 if you want to count the new Fox station here, is good-natured, as Stewart said. We're still talking about the bottom line, which is making a dollar for yourself and for your parent organization. So that competition, it gets mighty fierce sometimes. And we're back on once again, viewing several television screens while the executives from this news department are discussing not only what they're doing, but what the competition is doing at the same time. Ultimately, we hope to be able to view the studio itself while part of this newscast is going on the air, to give you an idea what's happening there. And this has been, I hope, an educational process for you as it's been for me. Even though both Calvin and I have been in this newsroom several times, never have I been here when the process was so crazy and frenetic and wild.
Let me tell you about my history of television, Gordy. Back in 1955, when I turned 8, I was on Bar 5 Ranch Time with Chester Bosworth. Yes.
Did he let you sit on the little saddle there?
Yeah, they even sang a song.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry we didn't have good film back in those days. Maybe it's just as well that the archives weren't preserved, but we do have some still photographs of a much thinner Chet Bosworth. Fortunately, no photographs of a Gordy Little back in 1955, as I wasn't even in the business then, but working on construction. And yeah, they're about 100 pounds difference between now and then.
And what people may have noticed here is that we just had a live coverage on the news being filmed right here, or taped right here, or broadcast right here, while we were hiding in the corner here. The camera with the reporter was going, and it was happening right here in the newsroom.
And this very often happens during the newscast. If somebody's at a station and they have a breaking portion of the news story and they just got off the telephone with somebody with updated information, that's part of that process of leveling the playing field between radio and television that Stewart and I discussed at some length earlier in our program, to let people in on part of the excitement that goes into creating a newscast during the process. People running from place to place will never be replaced. It'll be impossible for people to sit there and let somebody else hand them information. And you just saw Susan rush by, because these are busy people trying to get the job done And what Stuart said about not running to the microphone may or may not be true in her case today.
And most of us know what we do know about the newsroom from Mary Tyler Moore show, probably. That's 25 years old.
And radio may be WKRP, but what happens really on the inside and what happens on the television program is quite a bit different. So even though we enjoyed both of those shows, I don't think the people in this newsroom have enough time to get into the very interesting relationships and scenarios that they did on the Mary Tyler Moore show.
And there's not a Ted Baxter to be found in the place.
Not anymore. I don't even know if Ted Baxter if he's still alive.
No, Ted Knight has died, unfortunately. Yeah, but there's no Ted Baxters here at Channel 5. Is my point.
I hope you get a good picture of Andy Wormser's head, because originally there was a possibility he might be our tour guide, but he bowed in deference to the master, Stuart, who is the news director here. But Andy and the rest of the staff members have, as you said before, somebody had to do the work, and they've been a little wild.
It's been nonstop, and Andy found out that the assistant does the work, and Stuart got to chat with us. But I am sure while he was chatting with us, his mind was definitely on what was happening tonight, and his ears were probably elsewhere while he was chatting with us too.
Something else that mentioned, you can see it up on the screen there, that Stuart mentioned very often. Television news is broadcast on radio stations. Many radio stations don't have the inclination or the wherewithal to create their own local newscast, so they opt to run television news, and it's convenient for people like you and me who might be riding in their car somewhere at 6 o'clock, right?
Yes, as you and I found out last week when we came back from visiting with Sid Calci in Willsboro, in Essex area. I see the sports director is here now.
Man, smiling from a distance. And while the logistics of the present newscast are going on in the background, we're standing here blissfully going on our way. We're going to talk sports from the man who is the sports director. Mr. Kelly, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, thanks.
What's the hot news today?
Getting ready for the big Plattsburgh-Middlebury hockey game. It's the talk of the town. Can't wait to get out there.
You'll be there with a camera on your shoulder?
Absolutely, my appendage.
I can't. Speaking of appendages, Calvin and I have talked about that very often, and about carrying that camera for hours and hours on end during events that sometimes go into overtime, and then a second overtime, and a third overtime. So wondering, both of you aren't sway back, but he's been doing it a lot longer than you are.
Yeah, I think the right side of my body is a little bit sturdier than the left side after 5 years here.
We had hoped that television cameras would be getting smaller and smaller, but they keep getting bigger and bigger as they figure out new things to put on them for you.
Yeah, more gadgets in there, so it takes up more space.
You've had some excitement in your brief career in this business. I say brief compared to mine or Calvin's. Even Calvin's dates back to bless you, Thomas. That was a planned sneeze because we needed a good diversion out there. But you've covered some exciting stories, not only here but halfway around the world.
Yeah, I got a chance to go to Japan last February, and who knows, maybe again for the Olympics in '98. And I went to Salt Lake City about a month ago, so I've gotten to take some nice little trips.
You know, this is a factor that we talked about with Stuart as we were just discussing the overall news picture and how much competition there is in your business and in the news business. And it used to be that people in small towns didn't make those trips because the television stations and or radio stations, newspapers, et cetera, didn't have that kind of budget. But as it happens now, there is so much competition. The local sports director and his staff have to have a global view of things if they're going to compete.
Especially in this area because we're such an Olympic area, and that's my association with the U.S. luge team has really allowed me to take some of those trips. And I think that, you got to go where the athletes are, and sometimes that takes you halfway across the world. Sometimes it takes you a little closer to home, but you're right. I mean, it is competitive, and you really have to give people something interesting, really pique their interest. And sometimes I get to go some neat places to do that.
And if the Cardinals win that hockey game tonight. Maybe they'll do a little traveling long ways away later in the season.
Who knows?
I know of a couple of coaches and a few thousand fans who would like to see that happen.
Yeah, I think that they've got a legitimate chance to go to the national tournament this year. Who knows if they're the best team in the country, but who knows where they'll end up. They could be here, they could be going out west, but I'll be there with them.
The best part of the program is we record it now. It won't be aired until sometime in January. The score of tonight's game will be well known by then, and we'll know if those Cardinal basketball players can string longer than a 3-0 record, too.
They are looking very good. New coaching certainly has helped, and I think that they've got a lot of talent out there. And so far, early on, they've been doing it without their best player. Bryant Butler's been hurt, so with him back, by the time this airs, who knows where they'll be.
But you know what? Calvin finds it interesting to follow kids of all ages in sports here in the North Country, and I know one of your biggest kicks is going to a high school game of one kind or another, and you've been to many.
Yeah, high school football obviously is something that we focus on, and when the local soccer team's doing so well this year and in previous years in the state tournament, that certainly gets our attention. But that's what it's all about, really, in a small town like this, is to go out and meet high school kids and see what they're up to. And we're lucky we have pro sports so close by in Montreal and a lot of college teams, but high school is the most fun.
Calvin and I are very anxious to watch the growth of soccer in this area and in the United States, as a matter of fact. I saw a cartoon this morning in one of the papers. We haven't quite caught on, but we're in the process, I think.
Well, certainly we are, and I think that, the Northern Adirondack boys made it to the state finals last year, and the Northeastern Clinton girls did this year, so soccer in this region is clearly improving, and the talent level is improving, and I think that we're starting to catch up with everybody else, and interest is very high. It's if it's not the highest participation sport right now among kids that age, then it's getting there.
And there was always talk about how it decimates football teams and makes it difficult, but it's certainly, the soccer programs have certainly given a greater number of kids the opportunity to participate in organized sports, and you can't knock that.
No, it's certainly not. And I mean, you don't have to be, in football for a boy, you obviously have to have some size, and you have to be, a different type of athlete. I think it gives kids who necessarily don't have the size or don't have, the physical abilities that maybe football requires to go out there and play. And I think that's great. Soccer is obviously huge around here, and you see a lot of the schools, the crowds that they put out there every night. It proves that soccer is maybe not king around here quite yet, but it's getting there.
And isn't it fun? I know it is for Calvin and for all of us, to follow kids from the time they first start to kick a ball or throw a ball or whatever sport they're involved in, and then follow them through their college careers. And every now and again, we find one that does make the big time, and they remain friends. And isn't that a kick?
Yeah, it's a blast. It's nice when local kids stay around the area who play at high school sports, and a kid like Chris Gondek at Shazy, who's playing at Plattsburgh State now. We can follow his career very closely, and Pat O'Neill is playing for the hockey team, and he's a Plattsburgh kid. So anytime you can keep the local kids nearby, it's nice.
And it's awfully nice also to watch the players when they make the National Hockey League, or every now and again, in very rare occasions, the National Football League, or one of the pro teams in baseball. And that's kind of nice, too.
Yeah, I mean, it gives the local fans somebody that they can really look up to. And it proves, again, the level of play around here is really improving, because there are players who are making an impact nationally.
Chris, thanks for your time.
My
Good
pleasure.
luck, buddy.
Good luck to you.
Day of the year, so an awful lot of people are looking to you saying, what's going on?
Not too thrilled about this. It's not going to be awful, but believe it or not, it's going to rain.
Rain?
Yeah. What's going to happen is this. It's going to cloud up tomorrow. The clouds will thicken throughout the day. A little bit of rain by late in the day, but here's where it gets a little dicey. Tomorrow night, the rain changing back to snow.
Okay.
Now, we're not talking about a ton of snow, but you've got that period of time in between where things could be, with the temperature dropping, maybe
A little
a couple
dicey,
areas
yeah.
with freezing rain. So I just want to let you know to be careful. If you can travel during the day tomorrow, you're definitely going to be better off. And the wind chill chart, just checking it out. I know this hurts, doesn't it?
It doesn't hurt.
It is
Especially when I see the
freezing
numbers,
cold.
you're circling.
Well, Susan Post came in and she goes, "What is the temperature?" She had been out reporting outside. She said she was freezing to death. We're below zero again. Wind
Oh, of
chill.
course, yeah.
Here we go. My my goodness, 27 degrees in Plattsburgh, Burlington at 29 right now. Here's the good news for you. See, if we dig deep enough here, we've got some good news for you. The temperatures are going to go up tonight. We've got a warm front working its way through. We don't say that very often. So we're going to be in okay shape as far as the temperatures are concerned. Look at the winds there, gusting up to 31 miles an hour. High today, 29 degrees. We're going to get rid of that because I think we're going to find the temperatures getting a little bit milder than that a little later on tonight. Normal high 40. Do we need to go through this again? Tell you what, let's forge ahead, show you what the temperatures are doing. From Montreal, 28 through the Champlain Valley, temperatures in the 20s now, 27 degrees down toward Rutland. We're going to find all the temperatures going up. As a matter of fact, you can get a pretty good indication as to what's going to happen. Look at Messina right now, 34, the warm air coming in from west to east. And we've got just a little bit of snow coming down, mainly in northern New York. Watch this right here. Snow showers earlier work their way through. And if you're finding some, shouldn't last that long, maybe an hour or so. Pretty light stuff. We get rid of this stuff. And then things okay until late tomorrow afternoon. As far as clouds are concerned, see the bright white clouds here and there? That's normally where you're going to find the precipitation. That's exactly what's going on in the Northeast. Meanwhile, the rest of the country, we can find some clouds all right. From the Great Lakes right and back toward the Pacific Northwest. Hey, Montana, busy day. I want to show you something here. Check this stuff out right here. Billings, Montana. You talk about rough traveling for the holidays. Now, I don't think we're going to talk about too much of this stuff. But we are going to find some snow on the ground as we head toward the morning of Turkey Day. Let me show you the weather map very quickly here. It is very windy out there. The ferry situation, I understand, is very backed up for a number of reasons. The wind, not the least of the reasons. But this thing is going to work its way on through by late tomorrow. Low pressure is upon us. Again, clouds building, rain late, but then it changes back. Then what? We'll answer that for you in half a minute. Holy
Well, it's almost time for us to breathe a sigh of relief, but Andy's got to go on doing this for I don't know how much longer. Our program is almost over. Andy Wormser was the first guy we talked to when we walked in the building. Then he escaped and did a tremendous amount of work. And now that it's turned out successfully, wow, we thank you so much for inviting us here today, Andy.
Well, it's terrific. I'm glad you could come down, both you and Cal, and hope you had fun.
We had a great time learning this business from the inside out, and what's even more important, because we already knew roughly how things worked in here, to give our viewers who had no clue what a hubbub of activity happens inside a television station an idea of how you do things, and therefore understand a little bit more and appreciate what you're doing for the North Country.
Well, people see Aaron and Tom and Mark and all of our reporters out doing their job, but you don't get to see lots and lots of people who work behind the scenes. I mean, there are 2 or 3 people behind the scenes for every one person on air, and without them, none of this would happen. You know, you've got the director who has to push all the buttons, and there's so many integrated people who have to work on this that if one person doesn't do their job, it really shows. And when everyone is doing their job, you can't tell it looks easy.
It's a big machine, and it better be well oiled to work. I didn't see a single glitch, so you guys all did it just terrifically. Thanks again, Andy Wormser.
Great, Gordy. Thanks for coming.
Assistant News Director here at WPTZ Television, Channel 5. I hope you enjoyed our show. Who knows where we'll be next time on Our Little Corner. I lie a lot. If there's another chapter to a story, we open our screen again and begin. We wanted to come in and look at the archives. Stuart told us about the archives, and it's so tremendous. You try to save as many things as you think you'll need, but it's always the thing you need that you can't find.
Can't find is the word. We save virtually everything. Any story that we do, we'll put on a videotape. This has a story about Shem Lawless. He was the boy who drowned in the Salmon River in Malone, and all of our stories will be on here. Not what the anchors are saying, but the videotape. So if we need to pull up a story about a dog theft, we can go back and get that videotape. Now our computers will go back about 4 years, and so we can search through our computer archives if it's before that, if it's someone called me about a plane crash on the base back in 1980. Now, where we find that, you start pulling out tapes and looking through these logs. and try to find that. But hopefully,
Sometimes you say a prayer and hope the good angel is there so you can grab it with 30
Absolutely.
seconds to spare. Sometimes it doesn't happen. When it does, it's wonderful. One thing I wanted to mention, because we were given an extreme privilege of being allowed right inside while the broadcast was happening on the 6 o'clock newscast tonight. And although Calvin and I understand what a blue screen is all about, and we've been to Disney World and Universal Studios, so we know about blue screens, our audience may not. And so while Tom was doing the weather, I'm sure some of the folks out there viewing this were completely confused as to what was happening. Give us an overview.
well, in the old days when you did the weather, the meteorologist would actually take magic markers and write on a map. The map would be right behind you, and you'd point to the map, and that's how you would do the weather. These days, we've got computers, and I don't know if Tom showed you some of his computers when you were talking to
yes.
him before. In those computers, he'll put graphics together, and showing where the fronts are and where the rain is, and he can show you radar, and that is all superimposed electronically behind Tom. So he stands in front of a blue screen. The computer is told, forget about the blue and put in this graphic instead. And then he talks. He will talk in front of that. Now he can look into TVs that are on either side of the weather wall, or straight into the camera and see himself. The confusing part is you're not looking in a mirror. You're looking at what you're actually doing. So when Tom gestures with his right hand, what he sees in the camera is going left.
And yet he's still able to point at every temperature with exactly the right finger and make it appear as though it's all right behind him.
Absolutely, it's practice, practice, practice.
It's sleight of hand. There was on one of the networks last night, there was a special television show revealing how these major magic tricks are performed. We've done that for our audience today.
Absolutely.
Andy, thank you so much once again.
Thank you,
for
Gordon.
filling us in. And this may be the last ending of this show, but then you never know. Well,